15, 20%.
Yeah, that's a huge number.
It is.
Mm.
I mean, I really want you to let that number sink in for a second if you're listening.
Right.
Because that is the percentage of long-term couples who are currently living in a completely sexless marriage.
Yep.
Which means, if you are driving down your street right now or just looking out the window at your neighborhood, at least one of those houses with the perfectly manicured lawn and the 2 cars in the driveway and all those smiling family holiday photos on the fridge.
Yeah, the curated stuff.
Exactly. One of them is harboring this deeply painful, incredibly silent secret.
And it really is silent.
They haven't touched each other in a year. Or, maybe even more.
It's the kind of secret that isolates you entirely because nobody talks about it.
No, never.
Like you can complain to your friends about your spouse leaving the dishes in the sink, right?
Yeah. Or the snoring.
Right, the snoring. But you do not sit down at a dinner party, pour a glass of wine, and casually mention that you've been rejected in your own bed for the last 18 months.
God, no. You'd never do that.
It carries this profound, suffocating shame. And if you are listening to us right now, if you're sitting in one of those houses feeling like you are literally the only person in the world going through this way.
We are talking directly to you today.
Exactly. Think of us as your older, maybe slightly wiser, deeply experienced friends who have been exactly where you are.
Yep. Because we have been married for over 20 years now.
Over 2 decades.
And when you share a life, a mortgage, and a bed for 2 decades, you truly see it all.
You really do.
We have navigated those dizzying, honeymoon highs where we couldn't keep our hands off each other.
Oh, yeah. The good old days.
The good old days. But yes, we have also trudged through those long, quiet, agonizing stretches where we felt like absolute strangers. Those periods where the silence in the bedroom was so loud it felt like a physical weight pressing down on our chests.
It's heavy.
So we aren't looking at this from some ivory tower of perfection, We're looking at it from the trenches.
Right, exactly. Because the couples you see on social media posting their anniversary tributes, they're giving you a heavily curated highlight reel.
Always.
So today, for this deep dive, we are tearing down that facade. We've taken a massive stack of clinical research, extensive therapy guidelines.
That's our Gottman Institute stuff.
Yeah, the groundbreaking neurobiological work from Gottman, Masters, and Johnson's physical protocols, and deep psychological literature on attachment theory.
A lot of material.
It is, and
Yeah.
we are distilling it all down.
Right.
Our mission today is to lay out 10 things you need to do if you are in a sexless marriage.
Right.
We want to shortcut your path to understanding the underlying mechanics of what is happening to you and your partner so you can actually start fixing it.
And the way we're going to do this is crucial. Because we are a husband and a wife who have weathered these exact storms.
Barely weather them sometimes, but yeah.
True. But we are going to present both the male and the female perspectives on these 10 steps.
But we want to be incredibly clear right up front. We are not here to argue.
No.
We aren't here to keep score or, prove who is right and who is wrong.
Because there really is no right or wrong.
Exactly. Our goal is to show you how a man and a woman can lie in the exact same quiet bedroom, experience the exact same lack of intimacy, and interpret that silence in vastly fundamentally different ways.
Right. We're going to use our own 20-year history as the backdrop to explain the mechanisms behind those misunderstandings.
Because, honestly, we have misunderstood each other more times than I can count.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a miracle of patience and stubborn love that we survive some of those early miscommunications.
It really is. So let's get right into it. First things first, we need to redefine the problem.
Okay, let's redefine it.
When you look at the clinical data, a sexless marriage is technically defined as having sex 10 times or fewer per calendar year.
10 times. That's less than once a month.
Right, less than once a month. But the clinical field is very quick to emphasize that the real pathology, like the actual damage destroying the marriage, isn't that number.
No, the number doesn't matter.
Right. If a couple is perfectly happy and fulfilled having sex twice a year, the psychological community says, wonderful, live your best life.
Exactly.
The lack of sex only becomes a clinical issue when it causes deep emotional distress. The researchers call this the roommate syndrome.
Roommate syndrome. Yeah, I know that one.
It is so easy to fall into. You function flawlessly as co-parents.
Yeah.
You execute the morning school run with military precision.
Yep. You manage the household budget like business partners.
You keep the house clean. But somewhere along the line, You entirely lost the erotic spark.
Mhm.
You stopped being lovers and became like middle management executives running a domestic enterprise.
That is exactly what it feels like. And
Yeah.
here is the core mechanism you have to understand if you're listening. A sexless marriage is almost always a symptom of a lack of emotional safety, not a sudden, inexplicable lack of innate desire.
Okay, unpack that. Emotional safety.
Think about the evolution of a relationship. In the beginning, we all present our highly polished, curated selves.
Best behavior.
Right. I remember when we first started dating, I made sure my apartment was spotless, I dressed perfectly, I was endlessly attentive and, endlessly fun.
And I laughed at all your jokes, even the terrible ones.
Hey, some of them were good.
Some of them. But I also pretended I loved staying up until 2 a.m. when I'm naturally a morning person.
Right, we were both performing. But over 20 years, the performance stops.
It has to stop. You can't keep it up.
Exactly. The vulnerable, unfiltered, deeply flawed versions of ourselves emerge. And the nervous system is incredibly primal.
Oh, this part of the research is fascinating.
It is. If those vulnerable, unfiltered selves do not feel completely, unconditionally safe with each other, the autonomic nervous system literally shuts down the physiological capacity for sexual desire.
It just turns it off.
Yeah, it scans the environment, perceives emotional friction or distance as a literal survival threat, and says, I cannot expose my physical body right now. My emotional self is under attack.
Wow. And the profound tragedy is how differently men and women experience that nervous system shutdown.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Tell me the male perspective on that shutdown, because I know from the darkest periods of our own marriage, it was rough.
It was. From the male perspective, men have been deeply culturally conditioned to use physical intimacy as their primary and often their only acceptable avenue to feel emotionally connected, grounded, and validated by their partner.
Right. It's how you connect.
Exactly. So when a husband reaches out to his wife and she turns away, he doesn't just think, oh, I guess I'm missing out on an orgasm tonight.
What does he think?
He internalizes it as a devastating blow to his core identity. He thinks, I am unloved, I am undesirable, I am failing as a husband. The rejection completely bypasses logic and hits him straight in his sense of worth.
That is so hard to hear. Because from the female perspective, the mechanism is almost the exact inverse.
Really?
Yeah. Which creates this incredibly toxic, self-perpetuating cycle. Women generally need to feel emotionally safe, truly seen, and deeply connected before their bodies can even begin to generate physical desire.
Okay, so the emotional safety is the prerequisite.
Exactly. It's the prerequisite, not the result. If I feel like I'm carrying the entire mental load of the household,
Right.
like remembering when the kids need their vaccines, tracking the grocery inventory, planning the holidays, and my partner's just coasting, my nervous system is locked in a low-grade state of fight or flight.
You're just managing threats all day.
Exactly. I am managing threats. I can't just flip a magical biological switch and become an erotic creature simply because the clock strikes 10 p.m. and we were in the same bed.
That makes a lot of sense.
You often hear therapists use this analogy. Sex is just the report card of the relationship's overall emotional health. If the emotional connection is an A+, the sex follows naturally.
See, I get the report card analogy, and it makes sense on paper, but I have to interrupt there.
Go ahead.
Because that assumes both partners are actually willing to open the envelope. What happens when the husband is deliberately avoiding the classroom entirely because he already knows he's holding a failing grade?
Oh, wow. That's you.
When a man completely stops initiating over time, it's rarely because he doesn't want his wife anymore. It's because bringing home that F on the report card time and time and time again, experiencing the visceral sting of constant rejection, becomes too psychologically humiliating to endure.
So he builds a wall.
Exactly. The ego can only take so many hits before it builds a fortress. So he just stops asking. He creates the distance to protect himself.
Which perfectly leads into our second major point. Step 2, doing a biological and pharmacological reality check.
This is huge.
It really is. Because before we dive entirely into emotional fortresses and communication breakdowns, we have to look at the body's actual hardware.
Right, the actual physical machinery.
Sometimes the emotional safety is there, but the body's machinery is fundamentally rebelling. You cannot treat a marriage without acknowledging human physiology.
Absolutely not.
And for women, the biological barriers are massive, inevitable, and rarely discussed with the gravity they deserve.
The clinical data on this is staggering.
It really is. Perimenopause and menopause trigger a precipitous systemic drop in estrogen. And society treats this like a punchline.
Yeah, we just joke about hot flashes.
We joke about hot flashes and mood swings, but the reality is that estrogen loss causes profound changes to the reproductive organs. It causes the vaginal tissues to thin out significantly, lose their elasticity, and severely decrease natural lubrication.
Which leads to pain.
It leads directly to a clinical condition called dyspareunia, which is the medical term for painful intercourse.
Right.
And we aren't talking about mild discomfort here. We're talking about tearing, burning, agonizing pain. And here's how the brain works. If an act causes severe physical pain, the brain's amygdala rapidly wires itself to avoid that act at all costs. It's basic evolutionary biology.
It just wants to protect you.
Exactly. A woman's body will shut down all desire to protect her from injury.
And the biological reality for men is equally formidable, though it's shrouded in an entirely different kind of secrecy.
The ED stuff.
Yeah. The research indicates that erectile dysfunction, or ED, affects tens of millions of men. Furthermore, natural testosterone drops affect both sexes as we age, fundamentally dulling the baseline libido.
Right.
But ED carries a very specific, incredibly intense and isolating shame. Men equate their virility with their masculinity. When a man starts experiencing ED, performance anxiety immediately hijacks the brain. And here's the cruel biological joke of how this works.
This part is so unfair.
It really is.
Yeah.
Anxiety triggers the sympathetic nervous system, flooding the bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol, the fight-or-flight hormones.
Right.
Adrenaline physically constricts the blood vessels. So the sheer chemical panic of worrying about losing an erection actively and chemically guarantees that you will lose it.
It becomes a self-fulfilling biological prophecy.
Exactly. The more you worry, the faster it happens. So to avoid the intense, crushing humiliation of a failed sexual encounter, to avoid standing there feeling like less of a man, a husband, will often adopt a strategy of total physical avoidance.
So he just stops touching her at all.
Right. He stops initiating sex. But it goes further. He stops kissing his wife deeply. He stops hugging her from behind. He stops holding her hand on the couch.
Because it might lead to sex.
Because he is terrified that any physical touch might escalate into an expectation for intercourse, which will lead to a failure he cannot endure.
And this is where the profound tragedy of the male and female disconnect happens. I remember when we went through a phase of this years ago.
Yeah, year 7, that was rough.
Very rough. When you suddenly withdrew all physical affection, I didn't think, oh, he must be struggling with his vascular response and performance anxiety.
Right.
A woman's brain immediately personalizes the withdrawal. I assumed the absolute worst. I looked in the mirror and thought, I've aged, I've gained weight, he finds me physically repulsive. Or, the line goes to darker places, he's having an affair. We completely miss the internal panic you're experiencing. The woman makes it entirely about her desirability, while the man is agonizing in silence over his physical mechanics. It's a devastating misunderstanding.
It is. And we cannot talk about biological realities without addressing what the medical literature calls the SSRI paradox.
Yeah, the medications.
This is an incredibly common pharmacological disruptor of intimacy. SSRIs and SNRIs, antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, they're modern miracles.
They absolutely are.
They save lives, they stabilize moods by raising the levels of serotonin in the brain. But the neurobiological seesaw effect of this is brutal.
Yes, the seesaw effect.
Yeah.
Explain how that mechanism actually works in the brain, because it's vital to understand for anyone listening.
So, your brain operates on a delicate balance of neurotransmitters. When you introduce a medication that artificially floods the brain with high levels of serotonin to blunt panic, sadness, and anxiety, it essentially throws a heavy, wet blanket over the entire nervous system.
Right.
And because of the way these chemicals interact, artificially high serotonin directly crushes the production of dopamine and norepinephrine.
And those are the important ones for sex.
Exactly. Dopamine and norepinephrine are the exact neurotransmitters responsible for anticipation, motivation, pleasure, and sexual arousal. You are chemically suppressing the biological sparks needed for intimacy.
The clinical term for this is treatment-emergent sexual dysfunction, or TSD.
Right.
It causes severe emotional blunting. You don't feel the crushing lows of depression anymore, but you also cannot feel the soaring highs of arousal. And physically, it frequently causes anorgasmia, the literal inability to climax, or it delays the climax so significantly that the sexual act shifts from being a deeply pleasurable connection to an exhausting, frustrating marathon. You take a pill to save your life, or to save your marriage from the dark cloud of your depression, and the side effect of that very pill, annihilates the sexual foundation of the marriage.
It's so unfair. So the actionable takeaway here for the listener, if you suspect medication is the culprit, do not, under any circumstances, stop taking your psychiatric medication abruptly.
Oh, absolutely not. That is so dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. It can trigger a severe depressive crash or physical withdrawal. But you must advocate for yourself, go to your prescribing doctor, and have an honest conversation.
Right.
Often, the solution is remarkably simple. They might slightly adjust the dosage, or they might switch you to an alternative medication like bupropion, which targets the dopamine and norepinephrine pathways instead of serotonin, bringing the libido back online without sacrificing your mental stability.
That is so important to know. Okay, assuming the biology and pharmacology are checked and functioning, we have to look at the psychological dynamic between the couple.
Which brings us to the third critical step.
Exactly. Step 3. Recognizing your role in the waltz of pain.
I love how the clinical framework describes this because it perfectly captures the agonizing choreography couples get locked into.
It really does.
The waltz of pain is a predictable, deeply destructive cycle where one partner adopts the role of the pursuer, usually the individual with the higher baseline desire, and the other partner is forced into the role of the withdrawer, the one with the lower desire.
It is essentially a psychological Chinese finger trap.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. The pursuer is pulling as hard as they can to get closer, to bridge the physical gap. But the mechanics of the trap dictate that the harder they pull, the tighter the pressure becomes on the withdrawer.
Squeezing them,
and forcing them to lock down and pull further away. The harder you fight for intimacy, the more impossible it becomes to achieve.
Right.
The sources break these two roles down into the relentless lover and the reluctant lover. And understanding the hidden motivations behind these labels changes everything.
Because on the surface, it just looks like one person is horny and the other person is cold.
Right, but it's not that simple.
Not at all. The psychology goes so much deeper. The relentless lover, the pursuer, isn't just driven by a biological need for an orgasm. They are fundamentally driven by the deep, agonizing shame of feeling unwanted. Every single time they reach out in bed and try to initiate sex, they aren't just asking for physical friction. They are asking a desperate, highly vulnerable psychological question.
What are they asking?
They are asking, am I still lovable? Am I enough for you? Do you still desire me?
God, that hurts. And on the other side of that bed is the reluctant lover.
Yeah.
And they aren't withdrawing out of malice.
No.
They're driven by their own profound, paralyzing shame, the shame of feeling fundamentally inadequate.
Right.
They withdraw because the constant looming pressure from their partner makes them internally scream, why am I broken? Why can't I just be normal and want this the way I used to? Am I a failure as a spouse?
When I reflect on our own marriage, specifically around our 7th year, I can clearly see how I fell into the pursuer
Oh,
type.
totally. You were definitely the pursuer then.
I was. I would initiate constantly, practically begging for connection. And every time you sighed or rolled over or found an excuse to get out of bed, I didn't just feel a fleeting disappointment.
Right.
I felt it as a devastating personal attack on my identity as a man. I internalized your lack of desire as a referendum on my worth.
And as the withdrawer in that specific season of our lives, I can tell you exactly how it felt on my end. I felt completely, utterly smothered.
Really?
Yes. Your relentless initiation didn't feel romantic. It didn't feel like you were cherishing me. It felt like a relentless demand for a performance. It felt like I owed you access to my physical body. And if I didn't deliver, I was failing in my contractual duties as a wife. The pressure was suffocating. It made my skin crawl. It made me want to build a 10-foot brick wall around my side of the bed.
Wow. But here is where we have to reframe this for the listener. And I want to ask you this directly, thinking back to that time.
Okay.
Was your withdrawal, that brick wall you built, a calculated punishment designed to hurt me? Or was it something else?
It was absolutely not a punishment. It was a psychological immune response.
An immune response.
Yes.
Yeah.
When the pressure for sexual performance reaches a critical mass, the nervous system completely recategorizes the partner. The spouse is supposed to be your ultimate haven of safety.
Right.
But when they're constantly demanding something your body cannot give, the amygdala relabels them as a threat. It triggers literal fight-or-flight shutdown. My body was freezing up to protect me from the emotional overwhelm of your demands. I was surviving the pressure the only way my nervous system knew how.
And that is the key to breaking the Chinese finger trap. You have to recognize that the withdrawer's silence is a protective mechanism, not a weapon.
Right. You're not enemies.
Exactly. You have to see the waltz itself as the enemy, not each other. To get out of the trap, the pursuer has to do the terrifying counterintuitive thing. They have to stop pulling.
Yes.
They have to release the tension, push their finger inward, and create slack in the relationship.
Which is incredibly hard to do, especially when you throw massive life disruptions into the mix. Which brings us to step 4, navigating life transitions.
The big ones.
Specifically what the clinical literature refers to as the postpartum and aging crucible. If there is one singular event that acts as a bomb going off in a couple's intimate life, it is having children.
It completely rewrites the reality of the marriage.
It does. Let's talk about the postpartum reality, because the biological and physical toll on the mother is staggering, and it is rarely explained to husbands in a way they can truly grasp.
It really isn't.
There is a deeply documented phenomenon called being touched out.
Oh, I've heard of that.
When a woman has a baby, her nervous system becomes so overwhelmingly saturated by the constant, relentless physical demands of this tiny human. The nursing every 2 hours, the carrying, the rocking, the fact that a baby is literally physically tethered to her body for 12 hours a day.
Right.
That the mere thought of even 1 more ounce of physical touch from her spouse feels physically repulsive. It feels like you are drowning and someone is trying to hand you a glass of water.
Wow, drowning and someone hands you water. That's a powerful image.
It's true. You just want your physical body to belong entirely to you, in complete isolation, even if it's just for 20 minutes in the shower.
And the hormonal cascade actively supports this shutdown. It is fascinating, yet brutal for the relationship.
Prolactin.
Exactly. When a mother is breastfeeding, her pituitary gland produces massive levels of the hormone prolactin, which signals the body to produce milk. But prolactin has a secondary, highly aggressive function.
What does it do?
It actively suppresses estrogen and testosterone. This is nature's way of preventing back-to-back pregnancies.
Evolutionary biology again.
Right. So the prolactin doesn't just make her tired. It actively, chemically destroys her spontaneous libido and causes severe vaginal dryness. Her body is prioritizing the infant's survival at the absolute expense of the couple's reproductive drive.
Add to that the physical trauma. We aren't just talking about being tired. We are talking about women healing from severe vaginal tearing, episiotomies, or the major abdominal surgery of a C-section. The standard medical advice says a woman is cleared for sex at 6 weeks, which is honestly a medical joke.
A total joke.
The pelvic floor can take 6 to 12 months to rehabilitate. The body has been to war. And on top of the physical trauma is the crushing weight of the invisible mental load.
Right, a mental load.
It's the mother who is usually researching the sleep regressions, scheduling the pediatricians, managing the transition to solid foods, and worrying about every little cough. Her brain is operating like a supercomputer running at 100% capacity, 24/7.
It is a crucible. And from the male perspective, it is a profoundly disorienting, lonely time.
I can imagine.
As a husband, you watch the woman you love go through this massive transformation. You desperately want to help, but often you lack the biological tools to soothe the baby the way she can. You feel entirely displaced from your role as her primary focus. Suddenly, you are at the absolute bottom of the priority list. And then the guilt sets in.
The guilt.
Yeah. Because despite the exhaustion, the male biological drive for sex doesn't just magically switch off because a baby was born. You feel incredibly guilty, almost monstrous, for still having sexual desires while watching your wife operate on 2 hours of sleep. But that desire is still there, screaming for connection.
This is where we need to give husbands a very hard but deeply necessary truth, backed by all the psychological literature.
Okay, lay it on us.
When your wife pulls away from your hug in the kitchen at 8 p.m., she is not rejecting your soul. She's not saying she doesn't love you.
Right.
She is simply communicating that she has reached the absolute physical limit of her sensory capacity for the day. Her nervous system is overstimulated to the point of pain.
There is a common analogy in pop psychology that compares this to a smartphone battery.
Oh, the battery analogy.
Yeah. If the wife is drained to 0% by the baby, the mental load and the physical healing, the husband coming in and demanding sex is like trying to plug his dead phone into her dead phone.
Exactly.
It's not going to charge him. It's just going to permanently damage her battery. He has to let her plug into the wall, let her sleep, let her have time away from the house before she can ever generate a charge to give back to him.
See, I see the logic in the battery analogy, but I have to challenge that a bit.
Challenge away.
Isn't there a huge risk there? If a husband just steps back and is constantly waiting for his wife to recharge entirely on her own, doesn't that just create a massive physical and emotional distance?
That's a fair point.
How does he actively help plug her into the wall without making his help feel like a transactional prelude to sex?
That is the perfect question. He plugs her into the wall by taking on the mental load without being asked. He
Yes.
doesn't say, "What can I do to help?" which just adds to her mental load of having to delegate tasks to him. He just does the laundry.
He just does it.
He takes the baby for a 3-hour walk on Saturday morning so she can sleep in a silent house. He removes the obstacles to her rest, and he does it with zero expectation that she will reward him with sex that evening.
Because if there's an expectation, it ruins it.
The moment the help becomes transactional, like, "I did the dishes, so now we should have sex," the nervous system registers it as a demand, and the battery drains again.
Exactly. It has to be freely given. Which seamlessly transitions us into the fifth crucial step, mastering the art of the gentle rejection.
And equally important, the art of acceptance.
Right, because no matter how much you help around the house, there will be nights where the answer is simply going to be no. And how a couple handles that no determines the long-term survival of the marriage.
Rejecting a partner's sexual advances poorly with contempt or irritation will absolutely devastate a relationship over time. It builds thick walls of bitter resentment.
But on the flip side, forcing yourself to have reluctant, obligated sex just to keep the peace or to prevent your partner from sulking builds a deep, toxic resentment within yourself.
Yeah, that's terrible.
It trains your body to view sex as a violation of your own boundaries. The clinical sources provide a highly effective, non-negotiable 3-step method to turn down sex without causing lasting psychological damage.
This method is a lifesaver. Let's break it down.
Okay, step 1.
Step 1, you must explain why clearly and honestly. Do not just grunt a harsh no or roll your eyes or fake a sudden deep sleep.
No faking sleep.
Say something specific. "My head is absolutely pounding," or "I am so incredibly stressed about the mortgage payment right now that I can't focus."
Yeah.
You must provide the context.
Why is the context so important?
Because if you do not provide the context, your partner's insecurities will immediately invent the context for you. And the context they invent will always be, "She thinks I'm repulsive."
That's so true. Okay, step 2. You must suggest a rain check soon-ish to provide a psychological safety net.
Crucial step.
This is the most crucial step. You say, "I can't tonight, but how about tomorrow morning after the kids go to school?" Or, "Let's plan for Saturday night when we can really take our time." This explicitly tells your partner that the door to intimacy is not boarded up forever. It is merely closed for the evening. It provides hope.
And step 3, offer an alternative, lower-stakes way to connect in that moment. Say, "I don't have the energy for sex, but can we just spoon for 10 minutes? Or let's just hold hands and watch an episode of our show."
Right.
You are proving that you still deeply desire their proximity and their comfort, just not the intense physical act of intercourse.
Mastering this 3-step script is incredibly liberating for women. Historically, culturally, and religiously, women have carried an immense, toxic burden of guilt regarding saying no to their husbands.
Oh, absolutely.
Generations of women were taught that it is their duty to submit to sex to keep their husbands from straying or just to avoid a grumpy mood the next day.
Yeah.
But modern psychological research definitively proves that reluctant, obligation-based sex actively destroys genuine libido. It turns a beautiful act of intimacy into a dreaded household chore akin to scrubbing the toilet. Using the gentle rejection allows a woman to firmly honor the limits of her own body without feeling the agonizing guilt that she is failing as a wife.
And men need to understand why this script is necessary, which requires confronting our own intense emotional fragility.
Tell me about that.
We need to acknowledge the sheer crushing weight of hearing the word no. Men naturally take sexual rejection intensely, deeply personally.
Because of the culture.
Because society teaches us to link our sexual success directly to our value as men, a flat, unexplained no sends us spiraling into the darkest corners of our psyche. We don't hear, "I'm exhausted from work." We hear, "You are inadequate, you are unwanted, I do not love you."
It's so helpful to think of it like declining dinner plans with a close friend. If your best friend calls you and says, "Hey, I'm dying to grab dinner with you tonight," and you just bluntly say no and hang up the phone,
They'd be crushed.
your friend is going to be incredibly hurt. They will assume you are mad at them or that the friendship is over.
Right.
But if you use the script and say, "Oh man, I am completely exhausted tonight. I really need to stay in and recover, but I miss you. Can we do next Tuesday instead?"
Yeah.
The friendship is totally secure.
Exactly.
They feel valued and loved, even though the immediate answer was no. Intimacy in a marriage requires that exact same level of delicate reassurance.
So my challenge to you, the listener, especially if you are the pursuer who is constantly facing rejection, are you reacting so angrily to the rejection of the physical act of sex, or are you internalizing it as a rejection of you as a human being?
That's a deep question.
Because I promise you, 99% of the time, your partner still loves you deeply and thinks you are wonderful. Their nervous system just isn't prepared to engage in that specific act, in that specific moment. You have to separate your self-worth from their libido.
That is a profound distinction to make. Okay, let's move into the clinical interventions. Step 6 is where the advice gets really interesting, highly counterintuitive, and incredibly effective.
Embargo.
Yes. If you are stuck in a dead bedroom, the Gottman Institute and various sex therapists recommend a radical strategy. Implement a sex embargo.
A formal, negotiated ban on sex.
Exactly. You sit down together and you explicitly, formally agree that sexual intercourse and any activity leading up to climax is 100% off the table for a set, non-negotiable period of time. It could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be 6 weeks.
It sounds like absolute madness to most people. Like if your car is out of gas, you don't fix it by legally banning trips to the gas station.
Right, it sounds crazy.
But to have more sex, you have to officially ban sex. But when you dive into the deep psychology behind this, the mechanics are brilliant. By officially banning intercourse, the couple entirely removes the hidden, suffocating agenda behind every single physical touch. It stops the withdrawal's anxiety dead in its tracks.
I cannot stress enough how incredibly liberating a sex embargo is for the lower desire partner, particularly for a woman. Think about the daily reality of a sexless marriage. The withdrawer becomes absolutely terrified of any casual physical contact. If you walk up behind me while I'm chopping vegetables in the kitchen and you start rubbing my shoulders, my body instantly goes rigid.
You tense up completely.
My muscles tense up. My brain starts racing. Oh God, is this a trap? Is this shoulder rub a down payment on a demand for sex at 10 p.m.? If I lean back and enjoy this massage, am I writing a physical check that my body isn't ready to cash?
Wow.
So out of panic, I pull away and shrug you off, which of course deeply hurts your feelings and makes you feel rejected.
Because I was just trying to give you a nice shoulder rub. I had no ulterior motive.
Exactly. But the trust is gone. However, with a strict, mutually agreed upon sex embargo in place, I know the boundary is absolute. The threat is neutralized.
So you can relax.
Yes. If you rub my shoulders, I can finally take a deep breath, relax my muscles, and just enjoy the sensation of your hands on my back, knowing with absolute certainty that it will not escalate into a demand. I can experience the warmth of physical affection and proximity without the paralyzing fear of expectation. It reintroduces safe touch.
And let me tell you, it is an equally massive, profound relief for a man. Especially, and this goes back to our earlier point, if he's experiencing any level of erectile dysfunction or intense performance anxiety.
Yeah.
The sheer crushing pressure to perform, to magically summon an erection on command, to orchestrate a flawlessly successful sexual encounter is completely lifted off his shoulders. He can lie in bed next to his wife, hold her, touch her, even be naked with her without the looming dread of a potential biological failure.
That must be such a relief.
It is. The anxiety simply evaporates because the end goal, the high-stakes test he is terrified of failing, has been officially removed from the syllabus.
But I know some listeners are thinking exactly what you said earlier. How does banning something create more of it?
Right, it's counterintuitive.
The best way to understand the sex embargo is to view the relationship as a pressure cooker. The tension, the unspoken demands, the constant rejection, it builds up incredible steam. If you just keep turning up the heat, eventually the marriage explodes into resentment or infidelity. The embargo is the release valve. It takes the pressure cooker entirely off the stove. It lets all the pressurized steam out. It allows you to remember how to just be two mammalian bodies existing in a room together without it being a high-stakes performance review.
Which leads us perfectly into the 7th step. Once you have that pressure-relieving embargo in place, how do you actually start touching each other again without triggering the old anxieties?
You need a plan.
You can't just mandate an embargo, wait 30 days, and then instantly jump back into wild, passionate intercourse. The body needs to be retrained. This is where we look at the classic foundational clinical work of Masters and Johnson, sensate focus.
Sensate focus is essentially a structured 5-step gradual reintroduction to physical intimacy. And the rule is that you have to follow the steps agonizingly slowly over weeks without ever skipping ahead to the finish line.
Step 1 is non-genital touching. You take turns touching each other for 15 or 20 minutes. You focus entirely on the temperature, the texture, and the topography of your partner's skin.
Just feeling.
You touch their arms, their back, their legs, their face. There are absolutely no goals. There is no expectation of arousal. You are just relearning the physical map of your spouse.
Then, once you're both completely comfortable with that over several sessions, you move to step 2. Genital and breast touching, but strictly anal intercourse allowed.
The embargo is still active.
Right. You are exploring sensation in the most sensitive, vulnerable areas of the body, but the embargo is still protecting you. You are normalizing being completely naked, vulnerable, and touched without the terrifying pressure to climax. Step 3 involves adding lubrication to the touching to heighten sensory awareness and completely eliminate any physical friction or pain that might trigger an amygdala fear response.
Step 4 is what therapists call mutual touching or somatic attunement. Instead of taking turns, you are exploring each other simultaneously. You are sensing their physical state while regulating your own. It requires immense presence and focus.
It's very mindful.
And finally, after weeks of this slow buildup, you reach step 5, mindful sensual intercourse. But even here, the focus remains entirely on the physical sensation of the present moment, not the orgasm. And stopping the act at any time, for any reason, without guilt or anger, is explicitly allowed and encouraged.
I think the best way to conceptualize sensate focus is like going to physical therapy for your marriage. If you severely break your leg in a skiing accident, you don't go to the doctor, get your cast off, and immediately try to run a marathon the next morning.
You'd shatter it again.
If you do, you will destroy the bone. You start by just sitting on the edge of the bed and learning to bear weight. Then you learn to walk with crutches. Then you learn to shift your weight side to side. Sensate focus is the physical therapy of intimacy. It is learning to shift your emotional and physical weight back onto your partner safely, slowly rebuilding the atrophied muscles of trust.
Looking at sensate focus from a uniquely male perspective, it is a total necessary game changer because it forcibly makes men slow down.
How so?
Historically, culturally, and biologically, men are conditioned to view foreplay merely as a fast-track highway, a necessary but annoying preamble to get to the main event of intercourse and orgasm as quickly as possible.
Oh, right.
Sensate focus violently disrupts that script. It rewires the male brain to find intense, sustaining pleasure in the journey itself rather than obsessing over the destination. It completely dismantles the goal-oriented mindset that ruins so many intimate encounters.
And for women, it is an absolute revelation. Because it removes the ticking clock, it allows us to safely and selfishly explore our own bodies and our own responsive desire without the frantic, stressful rush to ensure our partner gets off. We can actually tune inward to what feels good to us without worrying about taking too long or making our partner impatient, which brings us to a massive paradigm shift in how we understand arousal and our 8th step, shifting from spontaneous to responsive desire.
This requires unlearning decades of cultural conditioning.
It really does.
Yeah.
We have to completely unpack and destroy the pervasive myth of spontaneous inspiration. Hollywood movies, romance novels, and television have completely ruined our expectations of long-term intimacy.
Do you really have...
They sell us this myth that you should always just feel horny out of nowhere. You lock eyes across a crowded room, sweep the papers off the desk, and passionately rip each other's clothes off in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon.
Right, like a movie scene.
That is spontaneous desire. And while it absolutely exists and happens frequently during the initial chemically flooded honeymoon phase of a new relationship, it is incredibly rare in a long-term marriage, especially for women navigating the exhausting daily grind of life.
And this is where the male and female divide is starkest. I'll admit, this was one of the hardest lessons for me to internalize in our marriage.
Oh, I remember.
Men, generally speaking, experience spontaneous desire much more frequently and consistently throughout their lives. We wake up in the morning and boom, the biological engine is running. A quick visual cue hits us. We see our wife changing her shirt and we are instantly ready to go.
Right.
Because of this, men get incredibly frustrated, confused, and ultimately resentful when our partners do not operate on that exact same immediate visual timeline. We think, why isn't she as excited as I am? What is fundamentally wrong with her, or what is fundamentally wrong with me?
Because what you fail to realize is that for women, the brain is the primary sex organ. We operate primarily on responsive desire. This means that the physical desire does not magically appear out of thin air. It only emerges in response to the right context, usually after physical touch, emotional connection, or deep relaxation has already gently begun. But the context has to be right.
Context is everything.
If the mental load isn't shared, if I'm lying in bed actively worrying about the electric bill or whether the dog needs to go to the vet or the pile of laundry in the hallway, my body will simply not respond to a physical cue. The mental environment has to be meticulously cleared of debris first.
This is where clinical therapists suggest a brilliant concept, creating a sex menu.
Yes, the sex menu is revolutionary. Think about how we traditionally view sex. We view it as a massive, rigid, 5-course meal.
The whole production.
It requires deep kissing, extensive foreplay, full intercourse, and simultaneous orgasms, followed by cuddling. When you are exhausted from working a 10-hour day and managing toddlers, the mere thought of preparing and consuming a 5-course meal is exhausting.
So you just skip dinner entirely.
So you just say no to everything. But the menu changes the dynamic by offering appetizers.
Appetizers removed the daunting, exhausting commitment of the 5-course meal. An appetizer could be a 5-minute shoulder massage. It could be 10 minutes of back-to-back breathing, sitting on the bedroom floor, just syncing your breath to regulate your nervous systems.
I love that one.
Or it could be the 20-second hug, which neurobiology shows actually forces the brain to release oxytocin, the profound bonding hormone.
The menu is amazing because it allows the lower desire partner to say, I love you and I deeply want to connect with you tonight, but I only have the biological energy for an appetizer. It completely removed the binary pass-fail system of intimacy. It's no longer a terrifying choice between we either have full intercourse and you get off, or we do absolutely nothing and sleep furiously on opposite sides of the bed.
Yeah.
It introduces a sliding scale of intimacy.
I always ask guys this, and it usually makes the light bulb go off. Why do we treat sexual intimacy like it's an all-or-nothing sport? Think about how you treat food.
Good analogy. Okay.
If you are only slightly hungry in the mid-afternoon, you eat a snack, right? You grab an apple or a handful of almonds. You don't force yourself to sit down at the dining table and eat a massive Thanksgiving turkey dinner with stuffing and mashed potatoes.
No, you'd feel sick.
So why can't physical intimacy be a snack? A 5-minute cuddle session or some playful touching on the couch can sustain the emotional connection of the relationship just as effectively as an hour of intense lovemaking, depending on what your bodies can handle that day.
I love that. It normalizes having different levels of connection on different days. Now, all of these physical strategies, the embargoes, the sensate focus, the sex menus, are completely useless if you're still tearing each other apart verbally. Which brings us to step 9. Changing the communication script.
Communication is key.
You absolutely cannot fix a sexless marriage in the bedroom if you haven't fixed how you talk about the lack of sex in the kitchen.
The clinical research from the Gottman Institute is the gold standard here. Communication is where the rubber meets the road. If you bring up the painful lack of intimacy by attacking, blaming, or shaming your partner, you are doomed before the conversation even begins. You have to learn to avoid what Dr. John Gottman famously calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling.
To bypass the horsemen, you have to use a specific, highly structured conversational tool called the gentle startup. It relies on I feel statements rather than you always statements.
Right, the formula.
The formula is very precise. I feel insert specific emotion about insert specific event, and I need insert positive, actionable request.
Let's break down exactly how that works in reality, because the phrasing is everything. Let's say a husband is frustrated. The default destructive way to express this is a sweeping criticism. You never touch me anymore. You're so cold and distant. We're just roommates. That is a massive attack on her character. It instantly triggers her defensiveness, and the fight escalates. But using the gentle startup formula, he would say, I feel really lonely and disconnected lately when we just watch TV in silence every night. And I need us to spend 10 minutes holding hands on the couch tonight before we go to sleep.
Do you see the difference? It is highly specific. It owns the vulnerability by starting with I feel, which prevents the partner from feeling attacked. And most importantly, it provides a clear, achievable, positive solution that the partner can actually succeed at completing.
The problem with the sweeping criticisms like you never touch me is how men specifically react to them. When men hear a broad emotional criticism, our default physiological defense mechanism is very often to withdraw completely.
The stonewalling.
We stonewall. We fold our arms, stare blankly at the wall, and shut down. Internally, the man is thinking, I cannot win this argument. If I engage, I'm just going to say the wrong thing. It's going to turn into a massive, exhausting screaming match and make things 10 times worse. So my best strategy is to stay totally quiet, absorb the yelling, and wait for the storm to pass.
But the tragedy is that women interpret that stonewalling, that blank stare, not as a de-escalation tactic, but as cold, callous indifference.
Really?
Yes, we see you staring at the wall and we think, he doesn't care about my pain, he feels nothing for me. And this creates a vicious cycle, because women often use criticism as a desperate, misguided plea to be heard. When we feel ignored or invisible in the marriage, we raise the volume, we criticize louder and harsher, desperately hoping that if we poke you hard enough, you will finally engage, fight back, and prove that you still care about the relationship.
But I want to push back on the gentle startup for a second, because life isn't a textbook. What happens when the dynamic has become so toxic and the resentment is so deeply calcified that one partner just flat out refuses to talk? What if even a perfectly executed gentle startup is met with an eye roll, a blank stare, or someone literally getting up and walking out of the room?
That is the hardest place to be.
Yeah.
But the psychological literature addresses this beautifully. If verbal communication has become too triggering, if words always lead to a fight, you have to bypass the verbal centers of the brain entirely and start with low-stakes somatic attunement. You have to rebuild safety without language.
My favorite technique for this is what therapists call toe-to-toe conversation.
I love the toe-to-toe.
It sounds incredibly simplistic, but it is deeply grounded in nervous system regulation. You sit on the floor or at the opposite ends of the couch facing each other, and the only physical contact you make is allowing your bare toes to touch. That's it.
Just toes.
Just toes. And during this time, you absolutely do not talk about the marriage. You do not talk about the sex life, the mortgage, or the kids. You talk about mundane, utterly safe things, the weather, a weird article you read online, a funny thing the dog did in the yard.
It sounds almost silly when you describe it, but the mechanism is profound. By maintaining light, safe physical contact while discussing non-threatening topics, you are slowly, incrementally reminding your deep nervous system that this person sitting across from you is a safe harbor, not an enemy combatant.
Exactly.
You are establishing a calm baseline of co-regulation before you ever attempt to tackle the heavy, radioactive emotional issues.
Which finally brings us to our 10th and final step, knowing when to seek help and understanding when it's actually... Okay, this is the ultimate reality check for the viability of the marriage. And the clinical data points out a truly shocking paradigm-shifting fact that I think is going to relieve an enormous amount of guilt for the people listening to us right now.
It is a total shift in perspective. The leading sex therapists and psychological researchers state this very clearly. A sexless marriage is only a clinical problem if it causes actual distress to one or both partners.
Let that echo in your mind for a second. If neither of you is genuinely distressed by the lack of physical intercourse, it is not a problem, period.
You do not have to fix something that isn't fundamentally broken just because societal expectations or a magazine article or some online show tells you that a healthy couple should be having sex 3 times a week.
Right. That is an arbitrary metric.
Completely arbitrary. Sometimes a completely sexless marriage is perfectly healthy, highly functional, and deeply sustainable. If both partners sit down, communicate openly, and agree that they are entirely fulfilled without intercourse, that is a successful marriage.
Yep.
If there are chronic, insurmountable medical issues that make sex physically impossible, but the couple remains deeply devoted, that is a successful marriage. Or if one or both partners discover they identify as asexual, they can still maintain a beautifully strong, loving friendship foundation. They can celebrate life, share profound joy, build a family, and deeply support each other's dreams without ever having intercourse again.
But, and this is the heaviest, most critical but of this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
If the lack of sex is entirely one-sided, if one partner is starving for physical affection, desperately begging for emotional connection, feeling profoundly lonely and rejected, and the other partner responds to that pain not with empathy but with contempt, that is the ultimate glaring red flag.
Contempt is the poison.
It is. Dr. Gottman's research is absolutely definitive on this point. Contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce, with over a 90% accuracy rate.
90%, wow.
Contempt isn't just anger. Contempt is a position of moral superiority. It looks like rolling your eyes when your spouse expresses their sexual needs. It looks like cruel mockery, biting sarcasm, or completely callously dismissing the other person's deep emotional pain as trivial or pathetic. Contempt destroys the psychological immune system of the marriage. It signals that you no longer view your partner as an equal worthy of basic human respect.
Looking back on our 20 years together, we have to acknowledge with total brutal honesty that seasons of low sex or no sex are completely inevitable in the lifespan of a long marriage.
Life gets in the way.
Life is heavy. It throws things at you that shatter your libido. Deep, complicated grief from losing a parent, the crushing anxiety of a sudden job loss, the all-consuming stress of raising neurodivergent children, navigating aging parents, financial panics, or global crises.
It all adds up.
It all takes a massive, undeniable toll on the body's capacity for intimacy. Seeking out a qualified sex therapist or a dedicated marriage counselor during those agonizing dry spells is not a sign of failure. It doesn't mean your marriage is inherently doomed or that you are broken.
No, not at all.
It is a sign of immense, courageous maturity. It means you value the history and the future of the marriage enough to bring in an objective expert to help you navigate your way out of the dark woods.
I couldn't agree more. Therapy is an act of love. But discussing this does raise a really tough, agonizing question that we have a responsibility to address, because someone listening right now is weighing this exact decision in their heart.
I know.
Is a sexless marriage ever legitimate grounds for walking away and filing for divorce? The clinical sources are incredibly clear on this, and they do not sugarcoat the reality.
Yes, it is.
If the painful lack of sex is perpetually paired with a complete, stubborn, aggressive refusal by the withdrawing partner to even acknowledge the problem or work on the relationship, if there are deep, destructive secrets involved, such as hidden addictions to pornography that replace the spouse, or ongoing infidelity, or, most importantly, if there is a total callous lack of empathy for the suffering and the loneliness of the starved partner.
Right.
If you are drowning and your partner is standing on the shore mocking you for being unable to swim, then yes, it is absolutely time to seriously evaluate the future viability of the marriage. You cannot heal a relationship if only one person is doing the heavy lifting. You cannot dance the waltz alone. It requires two willing participants.
That is heavy. It is heartbreaking. But it is the absolute truth, and we promise to give you the truth today.
We did.
Okay, let's take a breath and wrap this massive topic up. We have covered an enormous amount of psychological, biological, and emotional ground over the last hour.
A lot of ground.
What we want you to take away from all these clinical sources and from our own 20 years of stumbling through these exact same dark rooms is that overcoming a sexless marriage is rarely about the sex itself.
Almost never.
It isn't about rushing out in a panic to buy new, uncomfortable lingerie.
Yeah.
It isn't about trying to memorize some wild, acrobatic, new bedroom technique you read about online.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally entirely about doing the hard, terrifying work of fixing the emotional safety of the relationship.
Yeah.
It is about recognizing the destructive spinning cycle of the waltz of pain. It's about radically removing the intense performance pressure with tools like a sex embargo. And it is about slowly, gently, and bravely turning toward your partner's quiet bids for connection, even when you are exhausted.
It's about shifting your entire paradigm. Moving your mindset away from a terrifying expectation of performance and anchoring it deeply in the gentle practice of presence.
Beautifully said.
And I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to ponder as we end this deep dive. We started this conversation by talking about how frustrating it is that the diagnostic X-ray machine is broken when it comes to intimacy. You can't just point to a clean, jagged white line on a screen and say, there's the break, let's put a cast on it. But maybe that murkiness, that confusing lack of a clear binary answer isn't actually a tragedy.
What do you mean?
What if the painful, heavy, agonizing silence of a sexless marriage isn't the tragic end of your love story? What if it is actually a necessary, desperate invitation?
An invitation.
A profound invitation from the universe to finally strip away the polished, perfect, heavily curated versions of yourselves that you've been exhausting yourselves clinging to. An invitation to step into the terrifying vulnerability of your actual, unvarnished reality and finally risk being truly loved for the messy, imperfect, incredibly complex people you actually are.
What a beautiful, challenging thought to end on. If you can survive the silence, you might just find a much deeper, more resilient love on the other side. Thank you for taking this profound deep dive with us today. Thank you for letting us share our 20 years of bumps, bruises, and hard-won lessons with you. Until next time, please, take care of yourselves, give yourselves some grace, and please, take care of each other.